You know, this is an era of spectacular progress, particularly in bringing the good things of life to more and more people.
And from their talks was forged a map for the path to freedom, a compact for the future, for the future, for the future. A map for the path to freedom.
To share, so I'm just excited to have you on, Dennis Wycoff. Let's just jump in.
Yeah, thanks.
So stoked to have you. You are head of our security safety team.
Yes.
At JC.
Yep.
And
it's been a year.
It's been a year.
Yeah.
Already, man.
I know.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. And you're recently retired.
Yes, 2 years.
2 years retired.
Yes.
But 30 years as a firefighter.
Yeah.
In management,
Yeah, so I spent 32 years working for the city of Folsom.
Yeah.
Started in 1985.
Okay.
19 years old. 1 year of college under my belt. Yeah. Didn't know anything about the fire service.
Yeah.
And jumped in with both feet and never looked back. It was, I call it a blood-borne disease. Once you get it, you can't get rid of it. And
wow, that passion. Describe what do you mean by that?
I mean, like it's so contagious that you can't think of anything other than working in the fire service. It becomes an identity. Dangerously, it becomes an identity that you just fall into. Yeah, spent 32 years just, serving. It was a lot of fun. I would say enjoyed just about every moment of it.
Yeah.
Definitely hard stuff about working in the fire service, but I enjoyed every minute of it. Totally. Looking back, I wouldn't change anything about my career.
Yeah.
It was very good.
So I want to jump in. Sorry, I'm going to just dialing in a couple things here with the camera, make sure we're okay. I want to hear some of your journey.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of stuff, walked through a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff, a lot of hard stuff, but also leadership.
Yeah.
Like you've really learned a thing or two about leadership, leading well.
Yeah.
Through good stuff and hard stuff. But Dennis, you just have an ability to, I think, articulate and relate with whoever it is in whatever the situation. And you've just been a real, like, I would even venture to use the word patriarch. Like you have been a pillar in our community. You have so demonstrated like this lifestyle of humility and flexibility and coming in low, having led and been a true expert in your field. I feel like you have this real ability to always remain a learner, always soaking things in, supporting, adding value, So I just love who you are. I love what you bring.
Yeah. Thank you.
I love what you carry.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And so
I know that it's funny, when I started at JC, when we finally made the switch over to Jesus culture, I knew I wanted to be involved in something, right? And I just didn't know 100% what it was. And then I jumped into, the elements.
Yep.
And after completing them, I signed up for safety, and I was immediately asked early on if I would consider, a leadership role. And I told them no, that I didn't know the culture, and I didn't want to just be a guy who jumps in and starts, bringing my own 2 cents into this.
Fascinating. Yeah.
And so I spent a whole year just serving. And I, even at the end of that 1 year, I still wasn't sure that I wanted to be a leader, that I felt that there was a tremendous value in being just support.
Wow.
Just being a worker bee. just getting the work done,
Yeah.
right? And Candace approached me and asked me to consider it, and pray about it. And
How long have you and your wife been at Jesus Culture?
we started, I want to say in November,
Yeah.
before I retired. So
Okay.
November of 2016.
Okay.
It's funny. There's a story I need to tell.
Go for it,
Yeah, I
man.
mean, the reason for us, coming to Jesus Culture was both of my girls had already made the jump over to Jesus Culture, and
Okay.
it's interesting because when my daughter was in middle school, I want to say 6th grade. So, in fact, I just found pictures. It was in 2010. When she was approached by a middle school PE teacher who ran a youth group at Assemblies of God in Folsom.
Uh-huh.
And my daughter was, I called her a church gypsy because she literally would attend 3 to 4 youth groups a week.
Was she that hungry?
She loved Jesus. I mean, but more importantly, her connection was in these youth groups. She had friends in different circles, and Lakeside had a youth group that she was a part of. Oak Hills had a youth group that she was a part of. This Assemblies had a youth group, and then the church that we were attending at the time had a youth group. And she just would go to each one of them.
Yeah.
She just bounced around, and who am I to say no to that, right? I mean, it was like, oh, you want to go to a youth group? Okay, I'll get you there.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
And so this elementary school teacher who was kind of heading up the youth group at the Assemblies, he invited her to go to an encounter conference up in Chico, or up in Redding at Bethel
Which was
Church.
a Jesus Culture conference, yeah?
Yeah, and she came home and said, hey, Dad, I want to go to this conference up in Redding, and it's with the youth group that meets at the Assemblies Church in Folsom. And I'm like, okay, well, what's it called? And she's like, well, it's called the Encounter Conference. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. And she goes, yeah, and it's put on by Jesus Culture. And I went, stop. You're not going.
Okay.
I don't know anything about this Jesus Culture, right? And
protective dad
yeah,
mode.
and I'm like, I don't know that I want you to be exposed to something that I don't know anything about. So I could tell she was kind of like anxious about it. There was like this, Dad, come on, don't do this.
Yeah.
So I immediately jumped on the internet.
Oh gosh.
Found Banning had just wrote a book called Jesus Culture.
Okay.
Ordered it and started reading it.
So
I got to like chapter 4 and I was like, okay, when are you going?
Yes. That's epic. When you were on the internet, did you not come across all the cult stuff, or did the Lord blind you?
I read
get the good
some of it,
okay.
But
you took it with a grain of salt. We're like,
yeah. I mean, if I'm going to
source.
read something by somebody that is putting something out there like that, I want to know a little bit about them too. I mean, what's your background? What makes you but there was enough good.
So it only took 4 chapters.
4 chapters I was in.
And you were in.
Yeah. I mean, you could immediately tell that Banning's heart was to reach, the youth for Jesus.
Yeah.
And, I was like, okay, well, this is authentic. There's nothing to be concerned about here.
Yeah.
Right. And so, she went and she came back and she was wrecked.
Really?
Wrecked.
Just changed.
Wrecked.
Yeah.
She came back and she said, Dad, I had an encounter with Jesus. And I get weepy, and just, I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, I had a dream. And
while she was gone?
Yeah, in Redding. And she said, in this dream, Jesus said he would be there until I get married. He'd be by my side until I was married.
Wow.
And that I was with him,
Wow.
we were together.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, and it was a very vivid dream. She clearly could articulate the details of this dream.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, well, money well spent, right?
Oh, for sure. She's how old at this point?
She's like, I want to say 6th or 7th grade. So
okay.
maybe
Yeah,
12,
what is
13.
that? Yeah, 13, 14,
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
Yep.
Wow. Incredible. So that really opened the door.
Yeah, and she came back, and she's upstairs, and she's showering, and her stereo is blaring, Kim Walker Smith.
Right.
At the time, Kim Walker, I think.
Yeah.
It was like, what is that?
Right.
That
That's a new sound.
That's worship like I've never heard before. Wow. And so immediately the whole family is gravitating towards this new worship style. Wow. And where you can truly feel like the presence of God.
Fully
right?
free.
Oh,
no real agenda.
Just reckless. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
And so, so that became, music that I played in my, lifted Rubicon Jeep, with no top on, blaring as I'm driving through Folsom, right?
Yes, the senior firefighter chief.
Just literally cranked.
Going for it.
Kim Walker, Jesus Culture as I drive through town.
I love it.
And then it was crazy when they announced that they were going to move to Folsom.
Oh, gosh. That must have been
so immediately for my daughters, they were like, this is a no-brainer, Dad. We go to conferences to see Jesus. All of my youth groups go to Jesus Culture conferences. Why not just join the church?
For sure.
And so that was, they quickly, started.
Yeah.
And then for us, it was, I wanted to be released. I didn't want to just be a church jumper. I'd already spent, from the time that I started, going to church, basically attending one church. And so I had recently switched to a new church. It was a Foursquare church in Orangevale that I loved. And, I just didn't want to run from that because I didn't feel released.
Yeah.
And it was around November that we had been praying about just being together as a family at church. And I really felt the Lord saying it was okay to, make the move.
That's awesome.
And, I sent word to the pastors of my church that we were moving, and we received their blessing. And
so good.
It was good.
So good. It's definitely a right way to go with covering.
Yep.
And go with being sent versus exiting.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Right.
For sure.
Still an awesome church too, right?
Totally.
I got tons of friends there, and
totally.
I can go there anytime I want, right?
Totally.
It's not a bad thing.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
You haven't looked back. Come on, man. We talk often about what God's doing. And do me a favor, grab this guy and pull it in a little bit more. That's
Is it working for? Okay.
Even pull this guy up
so
it's out of your a little bit more there.
Is that good?
That's perfect right there.
Right there.
I had a lot to ask you, but tell me what it's like to be a firefighter. What is that whole world? There's a whole subculture of these men and women that are in the most intense situations, essentially, that our country faces.
Yeah, very early in my career when I started, I told you it was an identity. And it's you go from being a kid to being a kid that's allowed on the other side of the yellow tape. Not everybody gets to cross fire line tape or crime scene tape, just a few people, just law enforcement, fire, and as a 19-year-old, it's like, wow, I'm on the other side of this tape. Right. I'm doing what people, on the outside can't do,
Right.
It was really, it was almost like a dream come true for me. I had dreams about what it would be like to be a firefighter. And
when did that start for you?
So in the early 70s, there was a show called The Emergency.
Okay.
And it basically...
Pretty popular show?
Huge.
Okay.
It was... it outlined the start of paramedicine in California. It was show with a couple of characters called Johnny and Roy. Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto.
Johnny Gage.
Johnny Gage.
Okay.
And they were two paramedics. They were two young kids, basically, that were plucked out of the fire service to become paramedics for LA County Fire. And they spent, 3 or 4 seasons documenting, all the calls and stuff that these guys would go on. And, it was just something that burned. As a kid, you're like, these were heroes. There was another show called Adam 12 back then.
Okay.
And, it was another one of those, I'm either going to be a cop or a fireman, right?
Yeah.
Those were the two choices.
Right.
But I didn't really give it a whole lot of thought growing up. It wasn't until I was in college and I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I was offered a job to work as what we called a resident. You lived at the fire station. You had to, be in by a certain time. You had a bed at the firehouse. They gave you a locker to put all your belongings in.
Wow. And
it was home. That was home. You lived there.
Where were you at this point? What city?
Folsom.
Were you in? Okay, you're in
Folsom.
Folsom.
City
okay.
of Folsom. Yeah.
Okay.
So
But you weren't working for the department?
No. So it was it's like a sleeper program where you learn how to be a firefighter. They teach you everything you need to know.
Oh, you're not getting paid?
No money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just scraping by.
Oh yeah.
Totally.
No, it was
like an internship.
Like an internship
Deal. Yeah.
We got paid $5 for every call we would go on. And back then, Folsom was running about 1,200 calls a year. So even if you ran every single call, you're not making any money.
No.
Right?
No.
So.
Oh my gosh.
And it was interesting. It took about 3 months for me to actually get placed on a shift.
Okay.
And during that 3 months, they teach you everything you need to know about fighting fire. And and then I got placed on a shift and started working and getting paid. But it was a resident position. You were paid $3.25 an hour, no benefits, and no sick leave, no vacation.
So it's pure passion that's driving you.
Yeah.
You're risking your life.
My first year, I made about $6,000. That was my first year's take-home pay.
$6,000. All right.
Yeah, solid.
Wow.
Right?
Now, that's a very different story, right?
Yeah.
Aren't firefighters pretty well taken care of?
You could probably, most firefighters, like the city of Folsom starts their firefighters out around 55 to 60,000 a year based on experience and qualifications.
Okay. Yeah.
Very difficult to get in, very competitive. So
extremely. I've been fascinated by some of my buddies going after, not in recent years. I haven't known as many friends, but the competitive, like the military background that's like needed and celebrated in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The courses, the classes, the degrees, it's a lot more than meatheads in the fire department.
It's a science. It's a science-driven, community.
Yeah.
So we want you to have, a science background, basically.
Yeah.
And then the paramedicine aspect of it is, it's basically a nursing program on steroids. I mean, we stuff 2.5 to 3 years worth of knowledge down your throat in about 8 months.
Jeez.
To be a paramedic. And it's really tough. It's very, very hard.
This is a super ignorant question, but are all firefighters paramedics?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you just kind of paired the two together.
Yeah.
So describe that to me.
Yeah. So firefighters don't have to be paramedics. And vice versa. Paramedics don't have to be firefighters. But in this region, in the Sacramento region, the fire service provides the 911 ambulance system. And so pretty much every fire department in Sacramento County runs a firefighter paramedic program where you get hired as a firefighter paramedic. You have to have gone through paramedic school and fire science, have all this stuff behind you before you're really
so
going
it
to
would depend on the department, the region,
Yeah.
where you're signing up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I think for me, just looking back, I fell in love with EMS. For me, the medical aspect of the job was just as intriguing as the fire side.
Yeah.
Why
was that? Why
I think it had to do with just the level of complexity that you have to deal with in the medical side of things. I mean, you're constantly dealing with problems that have to be figured out. And as a paramedic, you get to be the one that figures those things out. It was, and you're alone. A nurse works in a hospital, has a doctor basically there to kind of back things up. As a paramedic, you're out you're out in the middle of nowhere managing a pretty stressful incident all by yourself. With literally no backup back then. It was, you were the only one.
Crazy.
And so it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Very challenging. I came from a sports background, so I loved the whole idea of football, baseball.
Okay, baseball.
Horrible at basketball.
You got the hype for it, bro.
Oh. Yeah.
But not so much.
Yeah, I played my senior year just because it was my last year and there was really nothing else to do. I needed to,
just because there's nothing else.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
But I was horrible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No. Baseball and football, definitely.
That's your
baseball,
jam.
my first love.
Okay.
But because of the background, because I had a sports background, the whole teamwork thing.
Team.
In the fire service, it's all about team. You can't do anything by yourself. There's just, there's so many things that have to be done in the fireground or EMS world that you don't get to do it by yourself. Law enforcement, you as a police officer, you can handle a traffic stop, or you can go check on a burglary, in progress or something by yourself,
right?
And wait for the cavalry to show up. But in the fire service, it's not like that. It's all team.
Okay.
So
wow,
it was that was a draw for me
for sure.
Yeah. The paramedic side of things, we were talking about that, but it's really important to understand that these firefighters that are paramedics, they basically have been put through a ton of schooling, It's, like I said, 3 years of nursing basically shoved down your throat in 8 months, and you have a ton to really kind of digest, and then you have to go spend, another 3 months perfecting your craft, working on your skill set.
In the field?
In the field.
Okay.
With a preceptor, with somebody there that's mentoring you and teaching you and making sure that you're not killing somebody, because, we carry a lot of drugs, and, in certain circumstances, the wrong drug is death for sure. So
what a high level responsibility.
It's huge.
Dude, how do you keep that from crushing you? Because people make mistakes, man.
They do.
I'm talking to my wife, who's a nurse.
Yeah.
Relatively new nurse.
Yeah.
And she's like, what a lot of people don't know is nurses aren't perfect. Doctors aren't perfect. Yeah. Well, maybe a lot of people know that. But like people, we're all kind of learning. We're all making our best call with our best judgment.
Yeah.
And sometimes what a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
How have you managed that?
Yeah, it's again, the team perspective is that we do a lot of self-critique.
Yeah.
We do a lot of team critique.
Wow.
We spend a lot of time in the critique process.
Yeah.
Where a call might have on the outside looked like it went really well, but the players know that it didn't. Certain little things need to be tweaked.
Wow.
And just about every call gets critiqued in the fire service.
Would you guys have a system for that?
Yeah.
Like, is there a protocol for you have a meeting or something after
every time
a call?
Yeah.
Every time?
Every time.
Really?
Yeah. There's never a call that goes by that we're not self-critiquing either as a team or
vary according to the department.
I don't think so.
Or that's just standard across
I think
the
it's,
line.
in my experience, it's standard across the line.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is huge.
Yeah.
What if we did that for our lives?
Right.
Or like businesses?
Well, I think about that often now because I'm going through this remodel project at my house, and I'm like, I wish you would have self-critiqued a little bit.
Done a little bit more.
Yeah, because
work on the
it's like
improvement.
the level of craftsmanship or the pride in work is just not there in some circumstances in the real world. And I think to myself, how would you like it if EMTs, paramedics performed, at a 70% scale,
just
right?
Kind of getting by.
Just good enough to, how would that make you feel? Or if law enforcement only had to be right 70% of the time,
Jeez.
Yeah. So for me, it's like, no, I want a service that self-critiques. I want a service that absolutely wants to be perfect, right?
Yes.
We're seeking excellence.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
I think that some of that becomes dangerous, when you're when you
can go a little overboard, cross the line into just negativity. I think even like for us as Christians, like we would use the phrase condemnation. Yeah. Like, or introspection, where it can just become this navel-gazing, never good enough. Like, I'm a high responsibility person, as like, I don't know if you're familiar with Strength Finders. A guy named Tom Rath wrote a book on the human strength spectrum. Yeah. Came up, I don't know, it's like 50 or 60 different defined strengths and abilities that we tend to be able to operate in. Yeah. And awesome book, great resource, super clarifying. But I'm like, one of my top strengths is responsibility, achiever, developer, consistency. Yeah. So that's really, this topic is very much wired, into who I am, but it totally can go too far. And I've had times in my life where I'm like, I need to back up hard. I am trying so hard to do it right now that I'm actually just cycling in my own fear and anxiety.
Yeah, and making mistakes because of that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen that a ton. Guys that care so much that to like do right and do good that they're tripping over their own care. Yeah. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So what have you found personally? Because that's a principle, the principle of critique and constructive feedback and healthy criticism. Like God disciplines the ones he loves. Yeah. And there's a critique there. There's you missed it, the hero sandwich. Do you know have you ever heard of the hero sandwich? No. Oh, you're going to love this. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it's when you're helping critique someone else, you give the two layers of the top layer of the bun is you're a hero. Second, of encouragement. Middle layer, it doesn't taste very good at all. Yeah. But it's the critique that you really need. Bottom layer, you're awesome. Yeah. You're a hero. Go ahead, take a bite of that, and you get a little bit more hero than the negative side. Yeah. But tell me about that.
That's never heard it put that way before, but that's the model that we use. Yeah. Is that you start off, let's talk about what went right. Yeah. Let's talk about what went wrong. Yeah. And then let's wrap this up with that you're still a great person, right? I mean, this is, in this profession, you usually don't make it if you're a bad person, Mm-hmm. And so we can wrap that whole, hey, look, you made a mistake. You did some really cool things. Mm-hmm. But we're here for you. You're a good person, right? Don't let this, be a distractor for you. Yeah. In the sports world, you have to be quick to forget. Man. Right? Yeah. You make a mistake, but you're back in the game. Right.
And if you get stuck there on the mistake, dude, that's going to tear you apart. It wrecks your game. It really does.
And so I tell people, hey, look, learn the lesson. Right? There's a lesson here. learn it, but forget about it.
Yeah.
You got to forget about what took place here, right?
Yeah.
There's a nugget here, but take the nugget and leave the junk.
Yeah.
So
I have a very practical example of this. I did a wedding recently for friends that were I was pastoring up at Bethel Church in Redding. She had essentially interned for me, traveled with me as I was doing some itinerant ministry, and they had asked me to do their wedding. Super honored. And Dennis, I dropped their rings. Mid-ceremony, bro. Straight up. The minister's worst nightmare that basically can happen. Well, it would have been worse if they'd like rolled down a sewer drain or something like that.
Yeah, right.
But like I'm the kind of person that I really care. I'm like, I am in a leadership position officiating this wedding. I am setting atmosphere and tone in a lot of ways. And I prepared hours, man. Seriously, like hours upon hours of thinking through, like, you know, what am I gonna say? Like, this is their wedding day. Like, I want this to be the best day ever for them, to be that memorable spot, you know? And I end up dropping the rings. Oh my gosh. And I ended up, it was Jesus. Jesus saved me. It was like, somehow, I don't even remember what I said because my adrenaline was so spiked.
It's awesome.
I'm like, but I picked them up off the ground. You know, one had like rolled under her dress because they're doing their vows or something intense, you know, and picked them up off the ground. And I just cracked this joke. I don't remember what I said, but I cracked this joke about the rings, and it was like everyone loved it, and it was fine.
Yeah.
And nothing was wrong. But I have to be careful because I can get sucked down the like, you screwed up so terribly, you know? And then that doesn't do me any good.
No.
We need to forget. We need to just like, I learned a lesson. I will never hold rings in my Bible ever again.
Yeah.
They will be on a finger.
Right.
They will be always in a pocket.
Yeah.
Something like that. So
that's funny. Yeah, but that's the whole mindset.
Right.
Is that you take the nugget.
Right.
And, you know, everything else gets, you know, discarded.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I didn't know that was such a huge aspect. What else in like culture, firefighting culture is like transferable, or you say like stands out? Like I miss that. Like you having been retired now a couple of years, what do you miss?
It is a family. You know, there's a ton of interaction every day. We live together.
Yeah.
You know, firefighters have a different schedule than the rest of the world. We work a 48-hour shift, so we're together for 48 hours, and so that means we eat and sleep, you know, under the same roof.
It's a lot of time.
And we spend, you know, during a summer, when I retired, our firefighters were averaging about 5 shifts a month of mandatory overtime. That's overtime that they didn't sign up for. That's overtime that was
just
not...
because there's so many calls.
Just because there was so much going on. Jeez. You know, the fire seasons have gotten so hectic.
Yeah.
And the way California works its fire seasons basically is that we're part of a master mutual aid system, and we just send people to fires based on the need and you know, size and complexity of an incident. And Folsom, at the time, we had 2 mutual aid engines that were provided by the state that we would provide the staffing for, and there was an obligation.
The mutual aid engine is the truck?
It was fire engines. We had a brush engine. We call that a Type 3 engine. It's a 4-wheel drive, you know, designed for wildland firefighting. Okay. You know, very much like the campfire. That's the type of engine you'd send up there. Okay. You know, rugged, four-wheel drive, go anywhere. Yep. Carries a ton of wildland type tools, lots and lots of hose.
Okay.
Very lightweight stuff.
How many different kinds of engines are there?
There's quite a few.
I see fire trucks drive by. I'm a guy that appreciates detail, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and like the ingenuity side, the technology side. I know nothing about fire engines, but I see them drive by, and I'm like, the level of machinery, detail, the gauges, the like.
Oh yeah, it's
like an airplane, a spaceship. That's more
there's a
what it's
science.
Like. It's like a spaceship
all by itself. Yeah, it's kind of like that. I mean, there's a lot
going on there.
There's a lot going on, and so we design apparatus, fire trucks. For specific tasks. So
you gotta have the right tool for the right job.
This particular type of engine, a Type 3 engine, is very much dedicated to the wildland firefighting aspects.
Okay.
A Type 1 engine, we call those pavement queens because they don't go off-road, right?
That's awesome.
And they're designed for residential, community type firefighting, the house fire, the commercial fire.
Yeah.
And then the big trucks with ladders on them, those are called fire trucks. So there's an engine and a truck.
Okay.
So trucks have ladders. They're also giant toolboxes. They carry pretty much all of the cool tools, all the rescue equipment, all the extrication equipment, so lots and lots of stuff.
Totally.
But our firefighters back when I was leaving, they were running a ton of calls. And so we would spend, 15 days a month living together, which is as much time as you're going to spend with your family. The difference being we're probably spending more awake time with this fire family than we do with our own family.
So the community is just unparalleled. Like,
it's incredible.
Yeah. And these are good people too. These aren't just
they're great people.
Normal people.
They're great people.
These are
high integrity, high quality people.
Wow.
But that doesn't mean we don't have family issues.
Oh yeah, there's always stuff. That's part of the no matter what relationship you're in, there's going to be conflict and stuff to work through.
There's a ton of it.
Yeah.
And you have, because no two minds are exactly alike. We're just always on different pages, and
some drama.
Somebody said something that I don't like. There's a book that's everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten, and it's true.
Wow.
It's pretty much, through life. If you want to be nice to somebody, or if you want people to treat you well, you treat them well, right? I mean, there's just some little rules that you learned in kindergarten.
We graduate beyond that or something.
Right?
We think we were too intelligent, or we're intelligent enough to where no,
I will
punish you with my silence.
Yeah.
And use disconnection as a solution.
Yeah.
And that's just So.
There have been some things that have occurred over time that made the fire service better and worse as far as, community goes. When I started, it was very male dominated. And they had an open dorm room sleeping system. It was not very gender friendly.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, so the fire service had to change, but that change process was painful. It took us some time to really figure out how we were going to manage through this.
Wow. Specifically the gender issue? Or
just because the female firefighter, when they, as they were starting to really engage in the fire service, there wasn't a place for them. I mean, this is, like I said, a really male-dominated profession back in the,
ever since.
Yeah, since it started. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you had said, kind of the military background, so they use the same open dorm room style living as you would find, like a barracks,
right.
So all your bunks are out in the middle and out in the open, and, so all of that had to be addressed. And there was one locker room, one shower, I mean, it was like, okay, so guys could go in, no problem, but what do we do with, with the female firefighter? And one of my super good friends, she started right after me. We basically went through life together in the fire service, and I really watched the struggles that she went through.
Oh man, I can't even imagine.
Oh, she was just
what a trooper.
Tormented.
Oh gosh.
By, by the changes, because every change pointed back to her, right? Everything that happened in the fire service, because she was kind of the lone ranger firefighter. Every time we had to do something different, everybody kind of, pointed fingers, and
people are always looking for someone to blame.
She may be the toughest person I've ever met.
What a pioneer, man.
Oh, just incredibly tough.
Wow.
And I look back and we giggle and laugh about the things that we went through, but I can tell you that she carries with her, hurt and, lots of, just the struggles. Those things were real to her. Everybody else can forget about them. If you're a guy, this wasn't a big deal, but if you were the woman that had to, the female firefighter that had to go through these things, very, very tough.
Wow.
And so
there's been a lot of growth,
a lot of good,
a lot
and
of
a lot
movement.
of bad, right? I mean, there was.
Yeah.
Today, I look at the fire service and it's completely different, right, than when I
Really?
started. So,
wow.
I would still say there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
With just being. I'm not going to use the word tolerant, because that's not right. To tolerate somebody means you still got a problem.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I think there just needs to be an acceptance that you can be who you are in the workforce.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, what you do, as long as you can pull hose, throw a ladder, right? Do all the tasks that are required.
Yeah.
You've passed the test. You've done all the work that needs to be done to get you there. I don't care what your background is, or what your what your status is, or anything else.
Yeah, jump on the team.
Yeah, you're a team member now.
Yeah.
And we've come a long way, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done there.
Totally.
And I miss working through those problems.
Why?
Just because I felt like we were part of that change team.
Wow, that reformation.
When I started, all male.
Yeah.
No female.
Yeah.
Right? And when I left, we had females that were dominating the fire academy.
Epic.
Just like, you can't keep up, guys. Like, they are doing more pull-ups, more push-ups, more sit-ups, running faster,
Women are incredible.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I have daughters, and so, I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you can do this, then by all means, I want you to be able to do it. If this is your call. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I want to get into some stories.
Yeah.
I want to hear some of your experiences, some of the standout ones. Yeah. From your 30 years.
I tell this. I teach CPR, and I tell this in every class. When I started at Folsom, we have this really cool facility in town. Houses some of the roughest people in the world. Folsom State Prison. And when I started, we were running 320 to 350 stabbing shootings a year at the old Folsom Prison. And this was prior to them building the new prison out there. And it was not uncommon for us to go out 1 or 2 times a day for a stabbing or a shooting. And the shootings were because guards were having to shoot
themselves.
Or protecting the population of the facility.
Man, twice a day.
Sometimes, yeah. So that was one of those things where, that's not an everyday occurrence for the normal firefighter, right? Having to go through the granite walls of Folsom State Prison was pretty intense, and we did that all the time. And when I was first in the fire service, 1 EMT, 1 paramedic. That was all there was. There wasn't, there wasn't a team of doctors there, right?
Right.
So very, very, you'd pull up, you'd know some things were bad because The prison's in chaos mode right now.
Right.
They've got guards running everywhere and doing crazy things that you wouldn't normally see. And you know, we would take out.
You're 19?
19, yeah.
Thrown into it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was really the call volume. I mean, that's what Folsom Fire Department did back then, was run to the prison and take care of stabbed or shot prisoners. And
Jeez.
yeah. So those were crazy times.
Yeah.
You know, and you end up with, you know, a prison guard in your ambulance and a chase car behind you that's, you know, two, you know, M16 rifles.
Right.
You know, they tell you, don't stop. You know, one of the things that you sign when you go to work for Folsom is that you acknowledge that they have a no hostage policy at the prison, and that if you're somehow taken hostage, they won't negotiate for you. They're going to do whatever it takes to protect the population. And so,
wow.
You know, so you're basically like, whoa, what do we do here?
It's heavy, man.
You know?
Wow.
And you're always thinking, okay, is this the real call or is this a guy that wants out, right? So you're always on guard. You can't really ever let your guard down.
They could stage something crazy.
Yep.
Bleeding out.
Well, the medical side of things, you know, somebody could fake a heart attack or, you know, whatever. So we were constantly like
on edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We learned their protocol as well as the prison guards.
Yeah.
Like if they're supposed to be shackled, you know, arms to the waist and legs to the gurney, we're not moving this gurney until their arms are shackled to their waist and their legs are shackled to the gurney.
Wow.
You know, that's just the way it was.
Did you ever have any situation like that kind of unfold?
We had a couple of prisoners that just were unruly. They were medical prisoners that didn't like us, didn't like the system. Mm-hmm. You know, they'd spit on doctors. They were just, you know, vile.
Yeah, yeah.
Just not good people. Mm-hmm. And you learn to deal with them. You know, I mean, we had like spit nets. You'd put a net over them so that they couldn't spit on you.
That's a thing.
Yeah, unfortunately. Right?
Gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So little things like that.
Yeah.
You know, that those were kind of the norm when I started. Standout calls early in my career. I was probably a brand new paramedic. Yeah. And we had a call for a vehicle rollover on the old dam road. You used to be able to drive over the dam before 9/11. And it was a sharp 90-degree turn as you crossed the dam and started to head down towards Folsom Auburn Road. Okay. A sharp turn. And there was a vehicle accident dispatched there. And remember driving the ambulance and pulling up and seeing what looked like a Suzuki Samurai, small-looking Jeep style, kind of the first little modified SUV. Mm-hmm. It had rolled. You could tell it had flipped multiple times. And there was just a number of high school students that had been ejected. And along the way. And that was probably one of the hardest calls that I've ever ran. They all survived, all lived, which was really good. But, you know, when you're new into the paramedic realm and you have, you know, 3 or 4 students that are young, you know, not
torn up.
Yeah. And so that was, you know, an early call. I would say every childhood call that I ever went on, I had super anxiety about, you know, just being dispatched to leading up to the, like on the way. Yeah. You just get this tension inside you that, oh man, I hope it all works out. You know, I hope that I can deliver and have the solutions to their problem, or at least get them to, you know, definitive care quickly. Mm-hmm. And so, those are the things that would really stand out for me. Had a drowning call that didn't go well, you know, with grandma, and those were hard. Difficult to see, you know, the interaction of family members when they lose a loved one. And then we had I think it's probably the call that stands out in my mind the most. We had a significant fire in Folsom in the old part of town.
Wow.
And, early reports on the radio was that there were multiple people trapped inside the house.
Okay.
And
Started as a house fire?
Started as a house fire.
Okay.
And so, I was on an ambulance that day, and first arriving engine was basically saying, second alarm, third alarm, Victorian style house, balloon construction, fires going through the walls, and people trapped, and they needed, they were going into rescue mode. They couldn't even really, fight fire because they needed to go in and get these people out, and we're encountering heavy heat and smoke. And I arrived in an ambulance. They had called for an ambulance because they had a victim that they had pulled out, and he was doing okay. I was working on him. He was doing okay. He was going to survive. I could tell he was okay. He had smoke inhalation and some small burns, but nothing major. And then I remember the chief yelling. I was the only paramedic on scene, but yelling for me to come over because they were pulling a burn victim out. And this guy had been second and third degree burns over about 90% of his body and was still on fire basically as they pulled him out. And they, got his clothes off. He was degloving, which means the skin was basically just kind of sloughing as they were pulling clothing off. And
it's just coming off.
Coming off, yeah. And he was still alive, which I could not believe. And,
wow.
Thrust right into work. It's like, okay, whatever, all the training that you've been through, this is the moment, right?
Man.
And so started an IV, intubated this guy, which, put an advanced airway in, called for a helicopter and waited with this guy thinking that he's not going to make it. And helicopter arrives, we transfer care, and he lived for about 6 hours.
Wow.
And then, succumbed to the injuries.
Wow.
But the smell, I'll never forget. Every time I smell burnt skin or someone burns hair, it immediately takes me back to that moment. And then just the look, right? I mean, you see, there's just nothing like burnt flesh. Nothing on the planet basically resembles that. And so those are vivid memories that I have that luckily, you talk through them enough, right? Back in the day, we had a lot of good open conversation about things like this. And
instead of pushing it down, stuffing, covering it up, manning through, I think it's been pretty clearly clinically proven that is not a good idea.
No, it's what leads to PTSD. It's, which is a whole nother problem in this profession. Our suicide rate goes way up, especially during the holidays, just because of all the stuff that people do stuff. all the junk that people try and stuff. It just wreaks havoc on them, especially during emotional times like holidays when you're supposed to be up and you're down, and there's, So
wow,
I've been very fortunate. I've never really had any type of PTSD symptoms or.
What a testimony, man.
Yeah,
that's
blessed.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I think that's the Lord's.
I've been covered for that. Yeah,
for sure. Like I've thought about this, like thinking about war veterans, guys on the front lines, police officers, in even missionaries in war zones.
Yeah,
they're on the front lines too. Totally different aspect of care, but like people and even friends that I've known who have been, in crazy parts of Africa, just really on the front lines. I think, and I believe this is a topic I really know nothing about, but I believe there's got to be a special part an aspect of God, of the Father, that works, helps us, covers us through great trauma.
Yeah.
Like I think there's got to be Holy Spirit covering us, a way to navigate through that, because I think the truth is no one's immune to PSD.
Yeah, PTSD.
PTSD.
Yeah.
No one is. No one is immune.
And it doesn't have
that.
to be something like a war situation or a firefighting situation or a police officer. I mean, PTSD is real for anybody because it's just how you deal with trauma. Like,
Right.
you know, the visualizations of trauma or whatever.
Right.
It doesn't have to be something crazy. People can have it from a vehicle accident, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the things you've recognized?
Well, what I do
Dealing
know
with
is
that.
that we were incredibly designed, right? I mean, God created us with so many crazy cool features that we just don't even realize how incredibly put together we are. When our body basically goes through a traumatic event, you get this thing called fight or flight. Your body produces adrenaline. Your senses become heightened. Your vision becomes acutely clear. Your hearing kind of basically goes away except for what is critically important to the mission. So in other words, you couldn't hear any outside noises except for what's really important to you.
Wow.
In this
Wow.
event. You stop seeing things. It's called tunnel vision. You stop seeing things on your periphery. You only see what's directly in front of you.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. I mean, and then time slows down. So your real-time perception is that everything is like literally taking 10 times longer than it should, which gives you a chance to react to things in real time, right? That you're like, how did I do that?
Wow.
How was I able to like avoid this, this incident right here?
Yeah.
It's because time slowed down in your mind, but nothing really slowed down, right? Your perception is that it slowed down. It gives you a chance to make decisions in real time, but you don't even know you're making them in real time. I mean, it's just crazy. It's people say all the time, how did you get through that firefight without getting hit? And it's almost, the same thing here. It's like, well, it's like I could almost see exactly where every pothole was as I'm running, a 9-second 100-yard dash, literally able to walk through the minefield and not touch one of them because I can see so clearly.
Wow.
And that's kind of that's our body. That's the way we're designed.
Fascinating.
Which is cool.
It's almost superhuman.
It's superhuman. It really is.
Like,
it is a great way to put it. Is that at that
Wow.
moment you become kind of out of your own body, and people describe it that way as if they were watching themselves from above, able to make decisions and do things, out of body experience type thing.
wow.
But it's all happening in real time,
Wow.
which is really amazing.
It is amazing.
But then your body does something else. Is it basically says, okay, I'm going to take that memory and I'm going to put it in its own little place. We'll just lock it up because I want to protect you. I don't want that to become the focal point of what, is going to, prevent you from surviving. I want you to survive.
Right.
So then it gets locked up.
Right.
And every once in a while, you'll do something that will open that box or unlock that problem, and it throws you into a tailspin because you've never dealt with it.
Wow.
So in the PTSD world, they've really done a lot of experimenting about right brain, left brain, and getting the two to talk, right? Getting both sides of the brain to basically communicate, and opening up those boxes and getting them out so that they've been dealt with. It doesn't get rid of the memory, but it doesn't become a shocker, right? It's not the shock and awe factor every time that box gets opened
Doesn't
up.
throw you
It doesn't
off.
doesn't put you into a tailspin. You're like, oh, okay, I know that box is there.
Yeah.
I've dealt with that box.
Yeah.
And when it comes up, I know how to deal with it.
Right.
You know, in real time.
Right.
And so that's kind of the whole mindset
principle
now.
Okay.
It used to be they had the critical incident stress management courses, and they'd put you in a big room with a whole bunch of people, and you'd all share your experiences. And they thought that that was one of the ways that, you know, you could solve this PTSD. But a lot of times that really didn't help a lot of people. I mean, if I hear your traumatic story and it's not the same as my traumatic story, it doesn't necessarily help me get through my traumatic story. Now I've just got to put your traumatic story in another box in my brain because I've just lived through your trauma, right?
Gosh.
So a lot of times you really need to be in front of a peer that's just listening, you know, somebody that just is going to hear your story, and you get to tell your story and you get it out there in the open, and then you kind of discuss it. And
huge key.
Huge. It becomes a big turning point for people that have problems. And I think the direction that at least the fire service is heading in this area is it's peer support. It's people that have been trained to be good listeners, that are willing to, at the drop of a phone call, put time aside for a peer that is in need. Yeah. I think we've got about 150 peer support firefighters now in Sacramento County.
Wow.
I was asked by the fire chief, the new fire chief, to join up and be a peer support person.
Okay. Currently?
Currently.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
And this was about a year into my retirement.
Okay.
So the department paid for myself and 2 other retirees to go through peer support, and it's been amazing. Okay. And we've been called out a couple of times already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most recently, got called out for 2 firefighters, 2 chiefs that were basically trapped on the campfire and almost lost their lives. I mean, they were minutes away from complete destruction.
Really?
Yeah.
They had just gotten surrounded.
Yeah. They were sent up on a road that had a mobile home park at the end of it, and their task was to try and get all the residents out, and they knew that there were people still up there.
Right.
And along the way on this road, they were encountering homeowner after homeowner after homeowner that was refusing to leave. They're like, "Yeah, we've lived here all our lives, and we're not leaving. We've been through 4 fires. We're going to survive this one too." And the guys were like, "No, this is a different animal. This is not the same fire that you've experienced in the past. This is a completely different animal." And they were able to convince people along the way to leave. All the people that they had countered, they told to leave. And they got far enough up the hill that they were almost to the mobile home park, and then the fire, conditions were so bad that they couldn't make it. I mean, fire was blowing across the road. It was a, ember cast, giant embers burning, parts of trees burning, flying across the road, in like 40 to 50 mile an hour winds. So they turned around and started to head back down the hill, and the roadway that they had just driven through that had no fire on it was now fire on both sides of the road. And a large oak tree, about a 26-inch diameter oak tree, had fallen across the road and cut off their escape route. And they had no way down the hill.
Wow. And
so they had about a 30-second discussion in their cab, talked about what their plan was, and they didn't have really more than one good choice, and the good choice was to grab really essentials and, run. So
really,
they grabbed what they could, put it on their backs, and started running down the hill. And they had radioed for help, and a team that was on their way up to help them encountered another oak tree about a half mile down the road from them, maybe a mile. Okay. But they were trying to cut through that tree to get to them. And by the time they ended up down there with that crew. They turned around and headed back. It was about a 6 or 7 minute time frame. Their vehicle had completely burned up. So that's how dramatically things changed in just a matter of minutes. So very, very difficult situation for a couple of leaders, that were in charge of an entire team, to have happen right at the very get-go of this deployment. This was on day one, This
day
was
one, man.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and they knew that anybody that was up there wasn't going to be found alive. That that whole mobile home park basically was going to be destroyed.
Wow.
So, a lot of heavy hearts.
Totally.
So the peer support team was activated for those guys, and just listening to their story,
That's such a key, Dennis, because I think even for me, with my background in ministry, young man, like I hear you talk about, and even Candace, who's a mutual friend, also a chaplain, and has seen some heavy stuff and been in some crazy situations. But the key and the skill of listening, listening well, like and it's just cool how truth applies and stands on its own 2 feet all over the place. How for me in my background, traveling in ministry, doing missions, a lot of missions trips, and doing it's not necessarily traumatic stuff. I've had some crazy stuff happen with street ministry, but I'm stretching people, stretching school and ministry students out of their comfort zone. We're going into churches, we're going into the streets of LA, we're going into mass college parties in Santa Barbara. We're not in comfortable settings. Let's put it that way. And as well, there can be a lot of kind of on another aspect, there can be a lot of comparison. There can be a lot of judgment in the church. There can be a lot of shame. And a lot of anxiety. That's part of my background in history, navigating through 5 years of panic and anxiety, depression, on medication at one point that didn't really help me, but stuck, not wanting to be where I was, and learning through that time. I think we think so often, I need to have the answers for you to be help for you. So we often come thinking, I need to counsel you through this situation. You coming to me with a problem means you're expecting me to have the answer. But that's not necessarily the case. In my opinion, there's something so powerful in the simplicity of standing with someone. For me, let's say I'm the one going through something tough, whether that's trauma or that's just me working through some shame in my life or some anxiety, fill in the blank. Me coming to you being like, Dennis, listen, I'm not expecting you to have the answer, but would you stand with me? The not being isolated and alone reality sets the tone for so much freedom and breakthrough in and of itself. And then just the skill of listening, I think, is a super underrated.
It is.
Reality. It's a gift, actually. I mean, it's a skill that we can hone and develop. So talk about that a little bit. What would you say to the average person in terms of the skill of listening?
It is a skill because we oftentimes want to fix,
all the time.
Yeah.
For sure. All the time.
And it's joked about a lot with husband-wife situations more than just in general. But, the wife will bring a problem that she just wants, the husband to listen to, and the husband's immediately stopped listening and already started to fix the problem.
Solve the problem, baby.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm solving this. It's, honey, I got the answer. And she probably already solved it too. She doesn't need your 2 cents.
Yeah.
She's just looking for your, ear, just to get this weight off of her shoulders. All she needs to do is really verbalize her problem and the solution, right? Because at the end of her dialogue, it's going to include the solution, but you didn't hear anything, so you took away her opportunity to just solve the problem. Right. So that was a counseling thing I learned, just being in marriage counseling,
Awesome.
having a marriage counselor saying, hey, Dennis, be quiet, just let her finish. Right. And then you'll probably hear that she's already solved the problem. She's not really telling you this to have it fixed. Right.
Yeah.
So learning that, having 2 daughters that I needed to just be quiet and listen.
Yeah.
And oftentimes my wife going, stop it, just listen, right?
Yeah. Women, we so need women in our lives. Oh my gosh.
Which translates into the firefighting setting where I'm like, I just need to listen.
Whoa.
I just need to be quiet and listen.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times these guys will work through their issue. They'll verbalize their problem, their event, whatever it was, and afterwards they feel better, right? I mean, they just got something off their chest. It's not a secret. It's no longer in this dark little corner of their brain. It's now open. They have an ally that they can communicate with, and it just helps to relieve tension. It just takes away a little bit of tension. And like you said, for a person that's depressed, if they feel like they're not alone, like they have somebody walking through the problem with them, it makes it better.
Totally.
It's not the same as if they're in this mess alone.
Totally.
So, alcoholism, drug addiction, it doesn't really matter. If you've got somebody walking through this problem with you, it makes it a little bit easier. It doesn't make the problem go away, but it doesn't make it feel like you're in this alone, and you have to be a listener. You can't just solve someone's problems by giving them solutions. They have to work through the solutions themselves. That's part of the ticket. I mean, that's part of, if I can get you to work through your problem, this won't be a problem again. You'll have figured out how to work through your through these issues.
Right.
If I just keep giving you answers, right? You're not working through the problem.
Right.
So
they ultimately didn't grow, and they'd still be susceptible and vulnerable to just the next thing that's coming down the
next
line.
problem is just going to be the next problem.
Sure.
Yeah, and so I want people that are thinkers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've said this all along. I don't need a robot in the fire service. I need a thinker. And this is what I told my daughters growing up. I want you to be able to think through problems. Whether you get it right or wrong, I don't really care at this point.
Wow.
I want you to be able to think through the problem, right?
Wow.
Because if you think through it and you're wrong at the end, that whole process gets analyzed and you'll figure out the right way.
Yeah.
If I just simply became the answer person for every single problem, they're never growing. They're never really experiencing failure, which is something I think you really need to live through. You need to really feel what it feels like, have that internal, the fire needs to be lit when you fail. And that's what turns you around and makes you succeed. I mean, that's that's the driving force behind successful people is lots of failures.
Wow.
So, but listening, being a peer, not a counselor. I mean, counselors are good, especially when you're stuck, right?
Sure.
You've worked through a problem. Two people can't get beyond this particular problem, or one person can't really figure out how to solve this issue and is looking for tools. Yeah, counseling has a great place, but for the most part, I think being a good listener, a good peer, a good supporter,
that's
those help.
A huge piece.
Yeah.
Man, tell me, I'm sure you've ran into some pretty miraculous happenings.
I have.
Have you? I want to hear some of those stories, like the supernatural breaking in, God breaking into situations, and like stuff, impossible stuff. You know, people that should have been gone, just not.
Yeah.
Like.
So, the biggest one for me is happened 11 years ago, and I talk about it I talk about it about once a week.
Wow, it's that on the forefront.
It's huge. So my family, we were getting ready to go camping, had the travel trailer loaded. It was a family camp for the church that we were going to. They basically were shutting down church for a weekend, and we were traveling to a place called Olima Ranch, beautiful place on the coast, and we were going to do church at a campground.
Yeah, I love it.
And we were packed up. We were ready to go. And for whatever reason, and I call it God, right? I mean, there's no coincidence. There's only God incidents, right? So some neighbors were walking by, and brand new baby. They had just had a baby, and their parents were visiting from India, celebrating the birth of their new baby in this brand new stroller, all the new cool, backpacks and all the cool stuff, that all parents have when they go for their first, couple of walks or whatever.
Right.
And they were loaded.
Yeah.
And they stopped to talk about camping. They basically just, hey, I've never gone camping before, and this is my new son, and I want to someday take him camping, and I'd love to be able to pick your brain on equipment.
Right.
And we just kind of shared for about 5 minutes, just, small talk.
Yeah.
And then they walked up the hill, and we weren't close at this point. I really didn't know them well. I knew of them, kind of acquaintances by some of the neighborhood meetings that we had, but nothing real, concrete. And I heard screams for help, and I looked up, and the grandpa was collapsing to the ground. So I yelled at my oldest daughter, Nicole, she was 10 at the time, to run in the house, grab a set of car keys, which always has a pocket mask on it, and my cell phone. And I said, meet me at the park. There's an emergency up there. And so she did that, and I took off running.
What is a pocket mask?
It's a CPR mask.
Okay.
I'll see if I can pull one out and show everybody. So it's this little device right here.
Okay.
And it's a mask that if you had to do mouth-to-mouth on somebody, it's a barrier that prevents you from basically, coming in contact with their fluids.
Okay. So it's just a
little
barrier
thing
that would go around the mouth.
Yep,
okay.
Mouth, just to
that
protect
you. Would breathe
Yep, you can breathe through.
Over.
It's got a filter. It's got a one-way filter and a kind of a valve that won't allow like vomit or saliva to come through.
Right.
But it allows you to breathe into it. So
that's great.
Yeah. So I yelled at my daughter.
Yeah.
Never used one before. I'd never done CPR off duty ever in my whole career.
Wow.
So.
But you had on duty?
Lots. Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got up there. I checked for a pulse. He didn't have a pulse. No breathing.
Wow.
I looked at his son and I said, have you ever done CPR? Do you know how to do CPR? He said, no, I've never done it before. And I said, okay, so I'm going to have to teach you how to do CPR. So I showed him how to do mouth-to-mouth on his dad.
Did you teach him how to do that because you wanted him to be doing it?
I taught him because the most important piece to CPR is the compression cycle.
And you need two people?
I could have done it by myself, but it's much more effective with two people.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to be able to do compressions, and I wanted him to do the breathing, because the breathing part isn't nearly as important as the compression part. And so And it's very difficult for somebody to do compressions on their own family members. Mentally, they don't want to push hard enough. It's like, I don't want to hurt them, right? And so my thought process was, I just need some help. I'm going to use them. I'm going to teach them exactly what I need to do, and we're just going to get after it. Yeah. So I showed him, and then I started doing compressions, and we were about 2 minutes into this, and help was on the way. And I looked at him and I said, I need to know, do you guys believe in Jesus? And he said, yes. And I said, can you please have your mom pray for your dad? And he said, absolutely. So he tells his mom to start praying. And I can hear her in the background. She's just praying like crazy. And we're doing CPR and we're not getting anywhere. Nothing's really improving. And statistically, if you did perfect CPR, you're going to save about 10%, so it's really, really low odds. Wow. And we did CPR for 11 and a half minutes before the fire engine showed up. And I really did not think he'd survive. So they loaded him up in the back of the ambulance when the ambulance got there and transported him to the hospital. And I kind of told the crews, keep me informed if something happens, if he makes it, let me know. So I never heard anything from the crew, and I didn't hear anything from the family when we got back. So I thought he didn't make it. And I didn't want to go over and really knock on their door and kind of press the issue. So, I figured, I'm home now. They know I'm home. Yeah. If he made it, they'll let me know. And nothing. So it's really, it kind of like, mentally, it was one of those things that I was like, this isn't right. We prayed. I was praying. I know his wife was praying. What happened here? And then I'd forgotten about it, right? So time goes on. Christmas Eve shows up, and we're celebrating as a family. We're got family members over, and we get a rap on the door, and I open the door, and there's Mr. Singh. He's standing there, alive. Oh my gosh! And he says, "Do you remember me?" And I'm like, "How do you forget?" Yeah. Right? I mean, like we were together. Yeah. I'm like, "You look amazing." He's like, "Yeah, it's a miracle." Wow. He said, "The doctor told me there's no reason for me to be here. Zero." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm believing that." I'm listening. He said, "That day, I had to have 5 major vessels replaced." Well, there's only 5 major vessels. And, as far as major vessels, we have 5 major arteries on our heart. So wow. He had to have all 5 of them bypassed.
So he had a huge heart attack?
He had a massive heart attack. Wow. Here's the other crazy piece. He had 0 deficits.
What does that mean?
There was no damage to his heart.
Wow.
None. And the doctor goes, That's impossible to explain. I cannot explain this. Wow. He goes, "You literally died and have no deficits." And I don't know why, but your heart should be very sick right now, and it's not. Jeez. And so that was amazing. Yeah. And he told me that he felt great. He had great energy. And then he was like, "Here's some gifts." And I'm like, "No, I can't accept those gifts." And he's like, "I am not leaving until you accept these gifts." Yeah. And I'm like, "Okay, I'll accept the gifts," And it was beautiful Christmas cards with scripture and, it was just amazing. He had given a gift to me and my wife and to my kids. Wow. And I thought, man, that's just amazing. What an answered prayer. Because I had prayed, God, just give me closure to this incident. Yeah. And I was like, this is the closure. I needed this. Wow. This is really, really good. Well, that's only part of the miracle. He shows up on my doorstep Christmas Eve every single year. Really? Every year. So 2 years ago, when he showed up with his grandson that was in the stroller. Wow. And a total emotional event, right? I mean, we're like totally crying, you know, celebrating the fact that he had 10 extra years with his grandkid. And by the way, every single year he shows up. This is not just, you know, and it's always on Christmas Eve.
Man.
So I always feel like I'm getting a Christmas present on Christmas Eve. I just know it's coming, right?
It's
anticipation,
so
right?
Yeah.
And so not this year, but the last year, he showed up with grandkids from Australia that, you know, they were both there just to say thank you for, you know, the time that they had with Grandpa.
Wow.
And then this year when he showed up, he had to show up early. I was like, it's funny, I was out in the backyard working, and Regina comes running out and she goes, Mr. Singh's here, Mr. Singh's here. And I'm like, what? It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
She's like, I know, he's here. He wants to see you. So I put all my work down and went out. He's like, I'm so sorry, Dennis. I had to come early. I'm like, oh, I'm just so glad you're here.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter when you show up. I'm just so happy to see you. And just sharing that moment with him all, you know, every year. And I tell people I'm not looking forward to a Christmas without him, you know.
Yeah.
So good. The total miracle. Just
raised from the dead.
Raised from the dead.
Impossible.
Like zero, against all odds. There's no medical explanation for it. Zero.
Wow.
And zero deficit. Zero heart deficit.
Man.
Which is why he's lived, you know, for 12 years now, and he looks better today than he did 12 years ago. I mean, literally, he just looks like he gets younger.
Sounds like how God would do it to me.
Right?
Man.
And so against anything, all my whole thought process is just completely, you know, wrecked because of Mr. Singh. So,
man, one thing that's been coming out, I've had a couple conversations about this. Maybe as we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. But just the fragility of life, like the deep, intense meaning and value, you know, of life that a lot of us are very unaware of our own fragility. Not that we would live in a state of fear or dread, because that's no life at all,
right.
You know. But you know, for someone like you, you've seen it. You've seen it all. You've seen a lot of death.
A lot of death.
People, normal people, were so isolated. Even just culturally, like in a lot of cultures, the whole family sees the body when someone passes. You know, the whole funerals are totally different. You know,
right?
Which there's a part of me that's like, I think there might be something kind of healthy to see life start and end, you know? Not that I feel like trauma would be fully healthy to go through all the time, but my point is, I think we as American Westerners live so isolated and unaware of the fragility of life that we can miss its value. We can think we're Superman and, you know, drive 100 down weaving in and out of traffic and not think about the consequences, as a silly example. But what do you, like, have you thought about that?
Oh, yeah.
The fragility of life? Like, the meaning,
it's what drives me today. I mean, I'm a part of a program called Every 15 Minutes for the high schools in Folsom. Started it we're in our 14th or 15th year of doing a program for the high school students to kind of teach them about choices, you know, drunk driving, driving while texting, you know, just the consequences that come, you know, that you just don't think are coming because you're so young and you're so invincible. And there's just, you know, the reality hasn't really hit you that you can die at, you know, just
boom
at a moment's notice. I go to the high schools and I teach a distracted driving course every semester. So, and I started that after I retired. So basically put together a PowerPoint presentation of just 20 or 30 accidents in Folsom. You know, just to let the students know that I'm not talking about, you know, something that happened in San Francisco or
India,
or
China,
you know, whatever.
yeah.
This is in your own town. These are people that have either lost their lives or have had their lives completely uprooted because of a 10-second choice or a nanosecond choice. I mean, just, and it's got to be premeditated. You got to think through some of these things before you even put the keys in the car or jump off a cliff. You know, I mean, we've got rivers and lakes and people love to, you know, be outdoorsy. I even hear, you know, pastors and associate pastors talk about their the fun that they're having. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I've been where you've jumped off that rock or that tree, but only with really bad outcomes. Wow. And it's not that I want to tell people don't go experience life. But one wrong move, one tiny mistake, and you go from having the best day of your life to having the worst day of your life. And
I just feel like wisdom sees both of those sides. Like it really is the aspect of wisdom to be able to hold truth and tension, because to live with no adventure.
It's no fun.
No. But
that's not what God called us to. I mean, we're adventurers.
Totally.
He wanted us to basically rule the land. I mean, I get it. That's our created being, is to go find the next big thing. And I wouldn't discourage that, but I tell people to be intentional about the process. You know, it's like, think about outcomes. Think about it. I mean, that's the bottom line. Are you willing to live with paralysis for the rest of your life? Because that's an outcome, right? On the flip side, if you're the guy climbing El Capitan, you know, and you're taking a route nobody has ever taken before, somebody's got to be that risk taker, you know. I mean, but you've weighed the consequences. Like life isn't going to be normal for you ever. It's always going to be on the edge, right? Your podcast with
Kelly.
Jeez. You know, I mean, she's taken some incredible risks, right? Huge. But she doesn't take it without calculating everything at the end, right? I mean, these are all risks that she's calculated, right? And I tell people all the time, I'm a risk manager. That's probably, you know, on the scale of 1 to 10, I'm a guy that puts risk management on like the highest rung, which means that I don't necessarily not take risks. You
manage it.
I want to know where I'm at in the risk scale, right? And so am I going to be doing something that I'm going to do it one time, and it's, you know, the risk is so outrageous that, you know, it's not worth it? Like driving 160 miles an hour on a motorcycle, you know, I mean, that's not something I do, right? I mean, or skiing in a half pipe, you know, on a snowboard, that's not something I do. That's not a good risk for me to take. You know, those are not well-calculated risks. Now, if I'm a wall climber and I've spent 20 years climbing walls and now I want to go climb El Capitan because it's my next adventure, it's a totally different risk. Right? I've put a lot of energy and time into this super extreme risk. But it's a calculated risk. I've worked my way through it. So that's my message to high school students, or anybody really, is, you know, don't be that guy that just goes and does something once just for the thrill of it. Because that's not a good risk. That's really foolish. And at the end of the day, if something really bad happened to you, you'd go, that was the biggest mistake of my life. But if you're the wall climber and you've done this your whole life and you're climbing El Capitan and something bad happens, you say, I'd do it over again.
That is huge.
Right?
That's the difference between being a victim and being powerful. That's it's calculated, it's thought out, it's intentional. That is awesome. I've never heard it put that way, that way before.
No, it's when you asked, do you ever think about the fragility of life? I think about it all the time. I've got 2 daughters, and I am always thinking about their life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want them making foolish mistakes.
Yeah.
I'm okay with you living life on the edge.
Yeah.
But it's got to be the edge that you're comfortable, that you've grown up on, right? Don't just go do something stupid because somebody else is doing it, right? The next big bridge to jump off of, if you're a bridge jumper, great. That's what you do.
Right.
But if you're the person that is just trying this for the first time and you're never going to do it again, and it's just to see if you've got enough guts to do it,
right?
Probably
it's
not
social popularity. Everyone else is doing it. Thing.
You're the one that's going to end up with 2 broken legs or paralyzed, and you're going to live a life of regret.
Totally.
So,
totally.
You know,
it's intense, man, and I think there does need to be a measure of intensity. There's a soberness.
Yeah.
There's a healthy fear, and it's just I think fascinating as well how the Lord still remains Lord and King over all of the stuff, even over our mistakes, over like the crazy miracle stories I've heard of people doing the dumbest things and like should have died or almost killed someone else. And unfortunately, a lot of that has happened, but there still is like an expression of the goodness of God even in our fragility, in our ignorance at times, to still remain, Lord. Like one thing that I've dealt with a little bit, and I'm actually wrestle with a good amount, is what's the balance between like healthy wisdom and just fear-based control? Because as a believer, we have, like, the God factor changes everything. Like, we have in many ways been called to be sheep amongst wolves. We have been called in many ways to live on the edge, to be in crazy situations, exemplified by the life of Jesus, which the natural mind would not consider that wise. I mean, it's one thing to jump off a bridge because your friends are doing it, but it's another thing. There's another aspect, I think.
I use this all the time, and it's David. David was anointed king at a very young age, and then told to go do what? Kill lions and bears. And that's not what kings do.
Right.
It's not.
At all.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just not what they do. And then what all those are risks, super high risk, right? I mean, you're with a sling out there taking care of the largest creatures on earth, right? But what did that prepare him for? I mean, for the next biggest risk of his life. It's winner takes all.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And it wasn't something that he wasn't prepared for. So yeah, the risk is huge. And we're called to take these giant risks, but he was prepared.
Yeah.
God had put him.
Key.
God put him in a position of understanding what he was going to be facing, and he didn't even know that that's what he was being prepared for. Right? I mean, so God's going to call you to do crazy, risky things. You know, sometimes they won't make sense, you know, but the bottom line is it's probably preparing you for the big event that you don't even know that's coming down the road.
Yeah.
And then it'll be like second nature. It's like Goliath is just too big to miss, you know? I mean, some people would be like, no, he's too big, I'm going to run. And David's like, no, like he's too big to miss. I can't miss this guy.
Yeah.
You know, I've practiced my whole life for this. So yeah, giant risk, but it's high frequency. I've done this my whole life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no big deal.
Good. Yeah.
And God calls us to that. I mean, he doesn't want us to do something half-heartedly, you know? It's like, if I've given you the call, pursue it.
Yep.
Firefighting, it's a call.
Wow.
Law enforcement, it's a call.
Yep.
We
amazing.
don't go from, hey, I'm been selected to be a police officer to patrolling on the streets the next day. It's months and months of preparation through academies where we teach and train and just drive home safety and all these different aspects. And then throughout your career, you hone them, you make them better so that when you're in a situation that is truly a risk, it's something you've done 100, maybe 1,000 times.
Yep.
It's not the first time you're seeing it.
Yep.
And it changes the way you handle it.
Yeah.
Motorcycle riders that do it for a living, getting up on the stage and preaching, right? That is not high. I mean, there's not a giant risk other than anxiety.
Right.
Right? I mean, the anxiety
Which
has
is
got to be
almost
overwhelming.
just as real.
It's just as bad.
Your brain, I don't think, can fully tell the difference at times.
There isn't a difference.
Yeah.
It's the same stressors. It's the
Right.
same environment.
Same mechanisms.
Everything is being triggered, right? But there's a difference between the first time you got on the stage and the 100th time you've got on the stage, right? Just the things that you've learned, the repetitiveness, it lowers your anxiety level, it lowers the stress, it makes you perform better, you see things clearer, right? You can think on your own 2 feet versus like something happens, rings fall out and you're like, uh-oh, what happened, right? What do I do here, right?
Totally.
But if this is your 100th wedding and in every wedding you've had something go on, the 100th time that this happens, it's like no big deal.
Right.
It's like, okay,
Exactly.
I got this.
Exactly.
And that's the risks. I mean, same with risks.
Yeah.
As we're taking risks, you learn to manage through them.
Yeah.
It makes life exciting, but not nearly as reckless, right?
Yeah.
And there's a recklessness in youth that I had, I think most people have.
For sure.
You feel invincible, that it could never happen to you. As we get older and more wiser, and
You see a little
you see
different.
things differently. So
It's one thing that I'm just reminded of in Psalms. It says, the wisdom to number your days. Maybe it's Proverbs. Give me the wisdom to number my days, and the blip in the radar of our little lives in light of eternity, the moment by moment that matters. And even that's, what I would encourage people with is like walking, carrying whatever they may outside of this podcast. Like, life is so precious.
yeah,
It is beautifully vulnerable. It is so short. We don't think about it very often, but the wisdom to number our days, to see with that eternal perspective of like my tiny little decisions so matter. My little forethought about this, it so matters.
yeah,
There's I don't know. I think we as a culture, we could grow a lot in properly valuing the smallness of just today.
yeah,
The ability to walk. That's actually something I've thought about on and off. It's like, I can walk. Like, thank you, Jesus. There's a lot of people that can't walk.
yeah.
Like, I can smell, I can see. And those moments of gratitude, I think, set some perspective. I know it has for me.
Hell yeah, for me too.
I think we need that. Just the thankfulness, gratitude side. So
Yeah, no, it's for sure. That's me.
come on.
Living this life, in the fire service and seeing life taken at a moment's notice, or in a moment, I should say, not in, I've learned that nothing can be taken for granted, and I am thankful.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, thank you. This was awesome, man.
Yeah.
So good.
It was fun.
So good. We'll share it and change the world. Life will become more intentional, and
Yeah.
and lived to the fullest and all the good stuff.
I'm
man.
good with that.
Come on, bro. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. I
All
look
right.
forward to hearing the rest of your podcasts because they're very cool.
Sure, man.
I like them.
Thanks, man.
All right.
That's a wrap. Boom, boom. That's great, man.
That was cool. I kind of felt like we talked a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Like it wasn't
I think it's...
no script.
Nope.
We were everywhere.
We were all over the place. That's the beauty of it. That's a good chunk, man. That was just 2 hours.
That was crazy.